Hello, and welcome back to the 15 or so subscribers I've got. And if you've stumbled across this new, thank you for joining. My name's Ian Francis. My channel here, Ian, is AI Gov Ian. I'm just going to be kind of, over this series of videos and a few things I'm doing, I'll be sort of walking you through the things that I do in AI governance. But in particular, I'm going to sort of spend a bit of time thinking about the way of some of the things that maybe I'm less comfortable with. So some of the things we're thinking about, maybe the building of AI and the building of AI governance in particular. So to start with, I think I'm going to sort of start on a bit of a journey. When we look at these things, there's a massive gap between the things that I think about and talk about AI governance and the things that I do. So I'm comfortable with the ideas, I'm comfortable with talking about stuff, but actually the building, I'm not always there. So I want to be able to make sure that I can kind of bridge that gap in my ambition. I'm going to try over the next few months to start thinking about the way that agents can be used inside of AI governance in particular. So I think this is really critical for us, and really having capabilities for tools to be able to operate for models that we go beyond just making and spitting out an output, but we're making decisions, things that are acting in a somewhat autonomous way. But I really want to make sure that we understand the core principles behind that. And really, that's what this is going to be about. So I'll do other videos on the side, and I'll talk about different features. Some of you may know me. I work for a large technology company, and I want to be able to sort of showcase some things that we do there, but I also want to be able to just talk about things more in general as well. So thank you very much for joining, and let's sort of kick off into the first one of these series. This is not going to be a long video. It's just to kind of give folks a flavor on what we're doing, or what you can do, not even what I'm going to be trying to do, really, realistically. So let's spend a bit of time on that. So this is kind of my first episode, which is going to be getting started MCP for dummies. Essentially, one of the things I was talking about with some colleagues at the end of last year and beginning of this year is we said, okay, great, we've got this really cool AI governance risk and compliance tool. Wouldn't it be great to have an agent take away some of the manual work to do things for us? Well, great. How do we go about doing that? It's very easy to say, let's get an agent to do something, but what actually is happening and what's going to be operating. So I'm going to share with some stuff here. Again, I'm not the most technical, so if you've got questions, feel free to add them in the comments, let me know. I also sort of stand on the shoulders of giants in terms of some of the work that other people have done. I'm just kind of replicating and stumbling my way through, but hoping to learn more. And the best way I think of learning is by doing. So let's start with, I guess, to some degree, thinking about the architecture. And I know it sounds a bit boring, but let's kind of understand it a little bit more if we can. Essentially, what we're looking at here is we're going to think about an agentic platform where we have an agent that calls upon a set of tools. That agent obviously is going to rely on use a large language model. But that agent will be interacted with, and it could be doing things on an autonomous basis. It could be being asked to do something via a chat. In our case, the demo and the things I'm going to be building out for us, I think, is going to say, okay, well, let's have a chat, an assistant, a chat bot we can talk to and have it call upon a set of tools. In this case here, those tools are kind of a Swiss Army knife for us to be able to go and talk to, maybe grab information from or update information to, or make analysis of information in an AI governance platform. Now, again, I know that not everyone's going to have all access to all things, and I'm not making this an absolute how-to tutorial. I just want people to understand how I think things are operating. So essentially, the way that I've sort of set this up, and I'm going to be having a chat using a tool called langflow, and again I'll put some links coming up in a minute, and they'll also be in the description. I'm going to be using langflow. I have a small account on OpenAI to test some things out, so again a paid subscription there so I can call upon some of their models, but you could use any model obviously with langflow. I'm going to be using the Swiss Army knife I mentioned earlier, but it's going to be using an MCP server, so an open source configuration for an MCP server that's going to allow us to run that locally, and I'll show you what that looks and feels like in a few minutes' time. And I'm going to be interacting with an AI governance platform, in this case here, IBM watsonx.governance console. And it's made up, and part of that tooling is underpinned by the GRC, or governance risk and compliance tool of IBM Open Pages. So fortunately, IBM Open Pages just this week launched an open source MCP server documentation and server code line. So I'll show you how I'm going to be using that really to kind of bring it all together. This is, like I said, the first step. Today's going to be the equivalent of me typing "Hello World" in a simple program. This is just a case of how do I get things moving through and sort of the outcomes of that process. So let's take a look at what we're doing. I mentioned before some useful links. You can go on and you can download langflow and work with that yourself. this is the GitHub repository for that IBM Open Pages local MCP server. And here's a link to a video on a colleague's recording of how he's used the Open Pages MCP server configuration, and he's one of the developers. I'm sure Jay would love you to reach out to him, and I'll put his details in the a little bit later on. But also, this has been worked on by a whole bunch of people. So let's just take a look at what I'm trying to get at. Okay, so if we take a look here, I mentioned before the idea of having our Open Pages MCP server. So I pulled this information down from GitHub, a great README that walks through exactly the MCP server. That diagram hopefully should make some bare resemblance to what I've just had on screen. Talks about the way that the MCP server operates, the way that it operates, call upon the tools, etc., how it's going to be set up. And you'll see here there's a bunch of different tools. And for a GRC point of view, the Open Pages tool, it's going to be calling about different objects. Out of the box, it's going to call just 3 objects for tools, and I'll show you what we do with those. But it's going to give you create, read, update, delete type capabilities. So we'll show you how those operate. But essentially, the way the system operates, it generates these automatic tools. It will also go ahead and discover all the fields that are on those objects inside of the GRC tool, inside of the AI governance platform. So for example, if they're fields on the risk or fields on the issue, the system will dynamically pull that information down. So it's going to reflect whatever, in this case, my fields are. Or if you'd had Open Pages yourselves, it will pull those down as an example. And there's instructions about how to do this. And again, I'm not going to walk you through the full details, but there's an approach on how to install, again, how to put that through. And again, for a newbie like me, I was going through terminal, creating a virtual environment, calling out some dependencies and filling in some variables that effectively give me some key information, where my Open Pages tool is, what my username and password, how I would be authenticating, and different elements around how it would operate. So again, I've kept it fairly simple. And then importantly, I can go ahead and start the MCP server, and then we'll go into what that looks like. But essentially, if we have a look actually in terminal, we might be able to take a quick look. You'll see here, once I deployed this, I'm able to go in and actually start up my MCP server. So in this case here, start MCP, simple Python script here that's going to run. And again, I'm not a Python developer. I just took what was there and had added in my different elements. And essentially, you'll see the system starts spinning up. It will then understand where it's linking to. And again, those environment variables will tell you, where your system is. In this case here, it's an internal system for us, but it's platypus.1, which is one of my environments that I work on. And it will tell me some information around that. And then it will go ahead and grab in the tools based around this information. So in this case here, some fairly simple descriptions. And it will go ahead and dynamically add in the tools, and one tool for each of these different actions. So you'll see here, create control, update control, query controls, and delete controls. So again, it does the same for issues, does the same for risk, etc. And this is a continually evolving tooling, and the team, I'm sure, who built that out will also, if you log onto that Git repository, take feedback and look at it from there. But essentially, once it's sort of spun up and added all that information together, we've got this server running in the background ready to operate and carry out actions or on behalf of the agents. The agent will call upon a set of tools. In this case here, those tools are going to run into Open Pages and the Open Pages part of the watsonx.governance console, and it will go ahead and use the APIs here, and it will do things, create, update, etc. So very, very simple, but that's kind of my idiot's version of running this. So when we've got that running, I've also then spun up my instance of langflow. And again, I'm not going to walk you through how to run langflow, but once you've run it, it will start. You're going to allow the terminal that's going to log here, but essentially you're going to get langflow will operate. And with the way langflow is set up, it has to make it easier for newbies like me, there's a nice visual representation of an agent. In this case here, I've got a very, very, very simple agent. And let's spend a couple of minutes walking you through the different components. So when I first started, it comes up with, start your basic agent, and you just drag in the different items. In this case here, I'm adding in an agent. The agent relies on a large language model to work with. I'm using a model from OpenAI. I've chosen the model, and in this case here, I just had to put in my OpenAI AI key. Again, pretty simple, and then we gave it some instructions. So in this case here, the instructions are actually on that repository in GitHub, but you'll see some on the README there about how it operates, what needs to happen, how it handles ambiguity. Again, you can tune this for your deployment, but the idea is that langflow has some instructions inside of the agent, almost like a system prompt to a degree, to give it some behavioral elements. Once you've got that, I've also happened to have an input and an output, so we can have a sort of an interaction. Again, you could be using this, your own agent, and deploying this agent inside of any sort of assistant or UI and other spaces. I'm going to use the ones that are available here inside of langflow to make it easy. And then the important part is actually I've configured langflow to say call upon a version, or call upon the MCP server, which is the one that I've set up here, which is the item that we just deployed using the code from Git. And essentially you'll see here it's going to be a tool here, and it's going to give me all the different items that it could do here. There are all of my items in my tool set. Pretty simple in that sense. And the way it will operate is we can then go ahead and use the playground inside of langflow to go ahead, test things out, play around with it a bit, and sort of see. And now, again, this is just a first stage for me to try. This has taken me probably a few hours and a little bit too long to some degree to kind of make sure I was getting this right. The instructions inside of the Git repository are actually to use Watson Orchestrate. Not everybody has Orchestrate, and I actually wanted to integrate with an instance of that AI governance tool that Orchestrate wouldn't be able to access immediately. And for the sake of expediency, I've been using langflow instead of Watson Orchestrate. But again, there are different tools out there you could play with. This is just an agent tool. MCP as a protocol is designed to be very flexible and align against different frameworks. So let's take a look at it. And what we can then start doing is going and asking it some questions. And you can see I was tying some things and playing around with a bit more, but let's just create a new chat here. And if I say, for example, find all open issues. Okay, this will run hopefully. And you'll see here the steps that the agents go through, again in a sort of a debug mode. And you'll see here it found a bunch of issues, and here are some of them. So it's given me a list of those. And again, this is just the results as it's coming back natively from the model that's pulling back on the MCP server. And you'll see here it's got my structure. So it's taken it, and then it's also put a nice wrap around it, as LLMs like to do. It's given me a nice view around that. And I can see there, in this case here, great. For me, it's fantastic proof because it's shown that I can connect to a system. And if I click into, for example, here, issue 001, I can click into that, view that task, and actually it's going to take me directly into, he says hopefully, take me directly into our governance console. You see watsonx.governance console, which is my AI governance tool of choice here. And you see it's taking me to that issue called library setup problem, and I can do things. Now we're going to take this a couple of steps further in coming videos. I just today wanted to be able to sort of kick things off and to get things started, but also to show how I could set this up in the easiest way. And this is me kind of, like I said, it's taken a bit of time, but I'm kind of really pleased with where we got to. My aim is to really then, in the next couple of videos, to do a few different things. Essentially, next time around, I want to spend some time talking about what are those agents? What do we want this system to do? How do we want our agent to operate inside of our AI governance tool? Do we want it to update things? Do we want it to carry out evaluations? Do we just want it to be able to help us guide us through the system? Or do you want it to make recommendations, document controls, analyze documentation that's come in? I mean, there's a whole suite of different things you could think about, and I'll sort of maybe get some people's views around that on the way through. So we're going to talk about what those structures might be. And then I'm going to sort of improve on the technical we've got to so far. So I want to be able to extend those tools. So I want to be we've just given you an understanding of reading, but I want to be able to go ahead and do more with that. I want to use the create, use update, use delete, and use combinations of those tools to allow us to do things, but also extend the tools. You saw we were using issue, risk, and control on that list of tools. Ultimately, I want to start moving this forward, and I'll show you how we extend the MCP server to add in additional tools for all of the other object types, use cases, models, approvals, agents, and tools themselves. How do we start bringing those as object types, and how do we deal with updating all the different information? So we'll be extending those parts around. Um, Before I wrap out, and again, this is my first video of this sort of style on YouTube, so I'm just giving it a go here. But before I wrap up, I just want to, I mentioned before I was standing on the shoulders of giants, I want to mention Jay, the developer who heavily worked around around the MCP on the open source space, Christoph, who's the product manager around that, along with editor, and Garda as well, out of our Canadian office. Garda's a superstar, a bit of a rock star in this space, and I'm really pleased and excited to try this out. Hopefully, thank you if you've got this far. Massive thanks for watching, and I hope to see you next time. And look forward to seeing you then. Cheers.